The Mad Woman on the Midnight Bus. It happened one night when I was taking the bus to my grandmother's house. That night was cold and thick with fog, and I'd already missed several buses because they were all overcrowded. Around midnight, about 12 a.m., I finally squeezed onto a nearly empty bus. There were only a few people on board. The driver, a fare collector, two young women, a man, and an old lady sitting silently. The bus began to move. As we passed by a psychiatric hospital, I noticed a woman in a hospital gown standing on the roadside, raising her hand as if signaling the bus to stop. Her head was completely shaved, her skin ghostly pale, and her eyes were vacant. Strangely, just as the bus slowed down near her, the driver suddenly stepped hard on the gas, speeding up and leaving her behind. Everyone on the bus was stunned. I was also confused and couldn't understand what had just happened. I asked the driver why he didn't let her on, and he stammered, "She's not a normal person, miss." He said it while glancing nervously at the rearview mirror, his face pale with fear. I followed his gaze and froze. The woman was running after the bus. But not in any normal way. She was sprinting at an inhuman speed, her body twisted unnaturally as if her joints were dislocated. Her blood-stained hospital gown flapped in the wind, and her mouth kept muttering something unintelligible. Her black, hollow eyes locked onto the bus. People on the bus started screaming. I was sitting near the door and felt my heart stop when she suddenly leaped and clung to the bus door, slowly crawling upward. It was a horrifying moment when her face came into view through the glass. Bruised, covered in oozing wounds. Her mouth stretched in a grotesque grin revealing sharp teeth, and her soulless eyes looked like black holes sucking in all the light. The fare collector grabbed his bag and smashed it against her hands, knocking her off. But eerily, she immediately stood up and kept staring at me, smiling that same deranged, bone-chilling smile. Eventually, the bus reached its final stop. Everyone hurriedly got off in a panic. I entered a nearby convenience store to calm myself down with some snacks. At the checkout, the cashier asked, "Are you okay?" I gave a nervous smile and replied, "I just encountered a crazy woman chasing after the bus." The cashier's expression changed immediately. He said, "She used to be a patient at the nearby psychiatric hospital. She had cancer and had to shave her head. But later, she developed severe mental illness, constantly hurting herself and threatening others. Her family had no choice but to commit her. Just a week later, she escaped the hospital, ran into the street, and got hit by a bus, right where you saw her tonight." I went pale and trembled. "Do you remember what bus route it was?" He hesitated, then quietly told me the number. I rushed back to the terminal to take a good look at the bus I had just ridden. And I froze. It was the exact same bus, the same license plate, the same dent on the side, and even the dried, rust-colored bloodstain I hadn't noticed before. The night wind cut through me like a blade. I shivered and instinctively stepped back. Suddenly, the bus horn blared, sharp and prolonged, like a scream echoing from the underworld. The bus had no driver, no passengers, yet the headlights flicked on, shining straight at me. Squinting in the light, I saw a figure standing by the door. It was her. Same shaved head, tattered hospital gown, eyes dark as death, and that ghastly smile slowly forming under the light. I turned and ran, but deep inside, I knew something terrible. No matter where I go, she will always know where I am. And maybe, just maybe, she's still out there, sitting among the empty seats on some midnight bus, waiting for the next passenger. The Howl at 3 a.m. I moved into a small apartment on the 5th floor of an old building in District 11 at the end of 2021. With limited finances, I chose the place because it was cheap and quiet. The landlord, an elderly woman, told me her husband had passed away years ago, and she had moved back to her hometown, so she was renting it out. The apartment was a bit old, but clean. What I liked most was the large window that looked out over the back alley. At night, the yellow streetlights cast a calm glow, creating a peaceful atmosphere. At first, everything was normal. I often came home late from work, ate dinner, watched movies, then went to bed. But after about 2 weeks, I began to notice something strange about that window. One Saturday night, I was abruptly awakened around 3 a.m. by a strange sound, a long, deep howl echoing from outside the window. It wasn't a dog barking. It wasn't the wind. It was something I couldn't recognize. a low, resonating sound, like someone was screaming from far away, but close enough to make my skin crawl. I sat up and walked over to the window, looking down. No one. The street was deserted, dimly lit by the streetlights, completely still. I went back to bed, telling myself it was probably the wind, though a lingering unease stayed with me. 3 nights later, again at exactly 3 a.m., the howl returned. This time, it was louder, longer, and seemed to echo from multiple directions. I grabbed my phone to record it, but the moment I opened the camera, the sound abruptly stopped. That's when I started to feel something was seriously wrong. I told my coworkers about it, but they just laughed and said I must have been dreaming. One joked, maybe it's a ghost. That's the witching hour. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I couldn't deny that the howling was real, and it made me feel like I was being watched. A week later, while cleaning the window, I noticed 3 long scratches on the outside of the glass, deep and evenly spaced, like claw marks. I lived on the 5th floor. No one could reach the outside of that window. I called the landlord. She just said, "Oh, it's probably just old. Don't worry about it." But there was hesitation in her voice, like she was hiding something. That night, I set up a second phone to record the window overnight. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. At first, nothing unusual. Darkness, distant streetlights. But at 3:12 a.m., the screen began to shake slightly, and then the howling started again, clear and chilling. At 3:15, a black figure flickered past the window, fast and low, gliding right against the glass. I replayed it again and again. That thing wasn't human. It was short, thin, and moved unnaturally fast. But the most terrifying part was at the end. The window started to fog up, as if someone was breathing on it, and then a tiny handprint appeared from the outside. I dropped the phone. My whole body was shaking. I knew I wasn't imagining things. Something was truly out there. I went to speak with Mr. Vin, the building's security guard who had worked there for over 15 years. At first, he was silent. Then, after a long pause, he said quietly, "The apartment you're in, there was an incident. A couple lived there years ago. They had a young child who died, fell out of that very window at midnight. Ever since then, anyone who stays there hears the howling at 3 a.m. I was stunned. That child fell from the same window I'd been staring out of every night. I asked him what I should do. He replied, "I don't interfere with spiritual stuff, but if you really want to stay there, you might want to leave a child's toy on the windowsill." Though skeptical, I gave it a try. That night, I placed a small stuffed bear on the window ledge. Strangely, that night was the first time everything was completely silent. No howls, no shadow. But the silence made my skin crawl even more. I checked the recording the next morning. Nothing unusual, but the teddy bear was torn in half, stuffing scattered across the window ledge. And on the glass, the same tiny handprint, perfectly visible. I stopped sleeping in my bed. I moved to the living room couch, as far from the window as I could. But every night, at exactly 3 a.m., I could still hear faint, tiny footsteps, as if a child were quietly walking in circles around the room. Then one night, I got a video call at nearly 4 a.m. The caller was unknown. I was half asleep and almost declined, but something compelled me to answer. The screen lit up, showing my window from the outside. No one was there, just the faint glow of the streetlight. But after a few seconds, a child's face slowly rose from the bottom of the frame, pale, with hollow black eyes, no whites at all, just staring directly into the camera. I screamed and hung up immediately. By morning, I had already packed and left the apartment. I never went back. Not even to collect my belongings. I hired someone else to do it for me. To this day, I don't know why it happened to me. Maybe I was chosen because I didn't believe and needed to be reminded. Or maybe that child is still out there, waiting for someone to hear its cries. I can't say for sure, but I know one thing. The howling at 3 a.m. is real. There are sounds not meant for human ears. And if you ever hear it, don't look out the window. Because whatever is making that sound might already be looking back at you.